Can't do it without it.
Item 5.4, K through 5 Math Curriculum Resource Pilot, Ms. Danielle Berman.
Hello, good evening. I feel like this time of year, every year, you just get to see me. We're going to talk about some math today. I have two people with me. I'll let them introduce themselves, but first I just want to make note. Mr. Fisher, I'm disappointed you didn't get the pink blazer memo, and we could have really rocked this joint tonight. So I'm Danielle Berman. I'm one of the LFRL curriculum coordinators, and we're here with a proposal for a math resource pilot at the elementary level, and I'll let these two lovely ladies introduce themselves.
I'm Caitlin Jensen. I'm the academic support coach at Howard Elementary.
And I'm Andrea Hermans. I'm a first grade teacher at Shoemaker.
And these two wonderful women have been a part of this process from the beginning. And so I invited them to kind of give their perspective on the different phases of the policy that we're going to talk through that really warrants the process that we went through. So we're here today because in 2019-2020, our last elementary math resource was adopted. And we all know what happened in 2020. And believe it or not, that was now going on almost 7 years ago. I don't know if you're like me and like COVID's just did something to the timeline in our brains, but somehow 25-26 next school year is going to be the last year that we have access, and we will be receiving student materials. Teachers will have access to the digital materials. So we have to go through this policy, which is 7320, regardless, because we're nearing the end of that current resource timeline. So district policy 7320 really warrants the steps that we as a district have to go through, especially in a large project when you're thinking about next year 13 elementaries, nearly 5,000 students are going to be impacted by this. And so there's a lot of due diligence that you have to go through to make sure we're making the right decision and we're investing appropriately to what our students and staff need. So that policy begins with a resource needs assessment, which Caitlin will talk through kind of the things we went through for that. Then that springboards an implementation plan based on what comes out of that first step. Then you establish a diverse committee to review resources and materials. Andrea will talk through kind of the different ways in which we involve stakeholders with that and what they determined. Then finally, we field test resources so that we really can ensure that our students and staff are having the experiences with materials that we need in order to get the student outcomes that we want, which is the proposal that we'll kind of end this presentation with. And then the last three parts of this policy what you'll hear from me next year, a year from now, when we come forward with an adoption. So Caitlin is going to talk about the resource needs assessment.
So for our resource needs assessment, we had three different unique stakeholder teams that met from November to January. And those three teams, we had the 26 elementary teachers from all buildings representing all grade levels, EL, special education, and our gifted and talented program. We had a team that included all of our academic support coaches and elementary principals. And when we met, we analyzed the district data that I will be presenting to you guys. We talked about strengths and weaknesses of our current resource, which is Origo, and we solicited feedback from the teachers in the buildings that were not part of our committee. Our two options that we had to choose from were stick with our original timeline, which is moving forward with resource exploration and then a pilot next year. Or the other option would be to potentially delay the timeline for 2 years and wait on that process. So all of the information that we were looking at was helping us to make that decision of whether we were going to move forward or wait for 2 years. On this first graphic, you can see this is our results compared to the state of Nebraska. The state of Nebraska is the blue column. Grand Island Public Schools is the red column. This is our data from the 18-19 school year with our previous resource to Origo. And you can see that the difference for Grand Island Public Schools compared to the state of Nebraska, in third grade it was 8%, fourth was 8%, and fifth was 9%. We were lower than the state. This next graphic shows our comparison with the state in this previous school year. And you can see that while for us, again, the red bars, we show growth in our areas, you can see that that gap between us and the state is growing. So we dropped its 17% gap for third grade, 11% gap for fourth, and 12% gap for fifth. So in every single one of those grade levels, our gap between the state is widening. The next graphic's gonna walk through, this is our MAP data, and we'll focus on kindergarten, first and second grade, so that's those first 3 rows. This is our fall data, and you can see those scores are highlighted in that red box. Then in the winter, our scores all decrease significantly. You can see that drop from fall to winter, and again, we're looking at those top 3 rows for kindergarten, first and second grade. And then while we do make gains in the spring, if you compare that first chart for fall to spring of 2024, we do not make gains back to where we were at the beginning of the year. So we have our scores, they drop. We do have increase, but we do not make it back, nor do we increase our proficiency level at the end of the year. Some more information that we looked at. You can see the top row of that chart is the state of Nebraska with the EL student population, free and reduced lunch, INSCAS math proficiency, and then that last column shows the resource that district uses for their math instruction. Then Grand Island is there more towards the middle, and you can see our EL population, we're at 24%. Our math proficiency was 48%, and then our resource that we currently have is Origo. The other 3 rows or bars to look at would be the 3 that are highlighted. Those are districts that have a similar number of EL students or higher that have higher percent proficient on INSCAS math. So that really helped us to look and see, well, so these districts have similar EL populations, they are performing better. What are the resources that they're using as just a place to get started for some potential resources to look at? Then we had our themes. This was based off of the feedback of our current resource, which is Origo. The things that were not working with Origo, the level of rigor, which is pushing students to that proficiency level and having the students be the ones doing the majority of the thinking or the work in the math classroom. Alignment to our state standards. Some of our standards, students were only completing tasks that were at the developing level versus being at the proficiency level. So that was one of the areas that we wanted to address potentially. Not enough opportunities for students to practice the different concepts and skills that were being taught to them. The number of strategies at times were overwhelming. Students could potentially learn 3 or 4 strategies for one concept, and that was difficult for students to be able to pick one of those strategies and then be able to consistently use that. The data in geometry areas within our mathematics, that was a weakness in Origo. There was not, the lessons that were in there, again, we're not pushing them to that proficiency level. And then as the data that I just showed you talked about it, our kids are not performing where we want them to be at. So our stakeholder team recommendations, overwhelmingly and unanimously, all 3 of our groups wanted to move forward with a pilot. So our teacher stakeholders group were 92% for, 8% against. The coaches group was unanimously in favor, and there were not concerns that were brought forward by the principals after reviewing all of the information.
So once the stakeholder teams recommended that we cannot afford to delay this pilot, we're ready. There was actually a lot of excitement brewing. I'll be honest, I thought when I presented the option of, hey, we don't have to do a pilot right now, let's wait 2 years. People were like, no, we're ready to pilot now. And I'm like, okay. So it's nice to have some excitement around that because it is a really involved process. But that kickstarts the next part of this policy, which is around developing an implementation plan. And this is really just a lot of work on the back end side that's going to encompass a lot of research, demos, samples from, you don't want to walk into a room with like 40 resources because you're like, where do I focus my attention, right? So we reached out to other districts in the state. We showed that EL comparison data. We knew some places maybe we needed to start to really hone in on some things. And in this process, we really narrowed down to around 6 resources that we really wanted to dig into further, that we felt met our needs, aligned with our vision of instruction. The other part of this phase is you're really creating a timeline for the work. The policy says that this process from beginning to end is going to take a year. With an elementary pilot and adoption of this scope and magnitude, you're talking closer to 18 months to 2 years to really do it from beginning to end. And then you develop, or I develop, a plan for selection of materials to pilot, which will involve a group of people that Andrea is going to talk about.
Thank you. So we really wanted to make sure that we had a diverse committee that was able to come and review these resources with us. So we included 17 people. Is that all we had? Teacher reps from all grades. It felt like a lot in that room, sorry.
There's a lot of books.
There was a lot of books. Kindergarten through fifth, so we had teachers from every grade level there, kindergarten all the way through first grade. We included our specialists, included our English learner teachers, our gifted and talented, and our special education. We had academic support coaches, principals, and our curriculum coordinator. We met together to review and narrow down those 6 resources over the course of like 3 to 4 weeks. We were meeting once weekly. We really wanted to focus on what high-quality instructional materials include, and our district guidance really helped us figure that out. So high-quality instructional materials need to align with our state standards, obviously to that level of rigor that is defined by the standard and listed in some of our achievement level descriptors. It's aligned with the district vision of instruction, which are our math commitments, provides guidance to inform lesson planning and including appropriate research-based strategies and scaffolding for those teachers to use, and then reflect and respect all of our students' cultures, languages, and lived experiences that they bring into our classroom every single day. The things that we really kind of surround our values around are these math commitments that were created a few years ago, really making sure that students are able to use their vocabulary, make connections, be allowed to make mistakes, and view themselves as a mathematician. And these really build into the mathematical processes that are given to us from the state around those same things. We centered our rubrics and the things that we were looking at to make our decision around 3 things, which is the teacher, being able to improve teachers' instructional practices, students, engaging students in the learning process, and then also that content of being able to provide the academically challenging content. And if we can include all 3 of those things, you have that improved student achievement, which is ultimately what we're looking to do. So in other words, the daily student and teacher experience with content is what we needed to consider first. We were trying to ignore all of the flashy parts of the curriculums, the things that they were trying to buy us out with, and really focus on the standards and making sure that it was going to do what we wanted it to do. So we really looked at bridges into math, which we got rid of fairly quickly. We kind of decided that that's not the direction we wanted to go. And we listened to demos from iReady, Amplify, which is Desmos Math from based off of Illustrative, Great Minds, which is Eureka Squared. We say here that a 6 was considered, which was math expressions, but when you look at those updates, none had happened since 2017. And with this going to last the next 7 years for us, that was a really long time to go without updates in a world like education. The 2 that we came down to were Amplify Desmos Math and Great Minds for Eureka Squared. So for Amplify Desmos Math, those strengths that we really liked through them was that it was based on illustrative mathematics, which we know and we trust. Embedded opportunities to respond in student discourse routines. A lot of our schools are focusing on those opportunities to respond to engage kids in the learning, and with those already built in, teachers don't have to build those in themselves, and it was really getting the kids discussing and talking about math. Lessons are task-based and student-driven, so kind of a 180 flip from what you would typically see of a teacher just teaching content while the students listen. The usability of materials and the clarity of mathematics progressions for teachers, we could easily see how one thing was building into another and progressing over time. And it was a focus on math identity and building that math community, which is exactly what our commitments are trying to do anyways. Eureka Squared was very similar to Amplify Desmos, but it had more of a development on the math as the focus and understanding that why. So teachers and students were understanding why the math was happening, and they were developing those as that number 1 priority. It has a variety, again, of opportunities to respond embedded in structures for that student discourse in every lesson. The lessons in Eureka Squared follow a very explicit routine that's easy to follow for teachers and students, and they have a really good balance between explicit instruction, but also students being able to explore different opportunities. And it has embedded support for teachers to understand the mathematics and ways to support students. Every lesson has ideas for scaffolding or differentiation based off of what students are understanding or not understanding.
So that committee started meeting towards the end of January after the initial stakeholder teams really recommended that we needed to move forward. They met, I just want to give a shout out to that team. Those teachers were meeting after school, after teaching all day long. They were meeting multiple times in February when they were given extended plan time to do report cards or after parent-teacher conferences, and they would come meet with me for several hours at a time and sit through demos and go through the pile of books that must have looked like Extra Human Bodies or something. So they met close to 7-8 times for multiple hours over the course of 2 months to really and it is exhausting work when you're digging into that. So shout out to that group for really, really digging in. And ultimately, they recommended those 2 resources. The other part of this policy or this step in the policy is work that I do with administrators, really determining how we're going to go about field testing the resources that this committee then recommended. And so the principals and I met, and the principals suggested building wide pilots. Prior to 2020, the last time we really had a full-scale pilot like this, it was kind of sporadic PLCs across the district that were asked to be a part of that. Building principals felt that we could provide more intentional support and collaboration for teachers if we identified entire buildings to engage in that pilot process. I thought that was a fantastic idea. And the surprise number 2 of this process was that 7 buildings reached out wanting to pilot materials. So the principals had the charge of going back to their buildings, talking with all their staff, talking with PLC, talk to their building leadership teams about, is this something that we want to take on for next year? And I had a problem I didn't think I was going to have. I had 7 buildings wanting to pilot those materials. Ultimately, we narrowed it down to 4, really just based on school improvement plans, some logistics, demographics, things like that. Because I know I wanted to try to have a title and a non-title building piloting both of those 2 resources. So next school year, Lincoln Elementary and Newell Elementary will be piloting Eureka Squared. In addition to our Skills Academy, which is housed at Lincoln, Star and Stolly Park Elementary, in addition to our newcomer program that is housed at Stolly Park, will be piloting Amplified Desmos Math. So that brings us to kind of the why we're here today. In order for us to field test those materials, obviously we have to have funds in order to do that. The great thing about this is the original timeline that really started from 2019, 2020. So we've had L4L funds set aside to do this work. And we just kind of had it earmarked in anticipation of if that initial committee had recommended we move forward. So it's been there for several years waiting for this moment. But it is a large pilot. When you think about a large district like Grand Island, the number of students who are going to be involved in this project is larger than most districts in the state of Nebraska. We're going to have 1,400 students. We'll have 66 teachers, and so the funding as part of this proposal is to ensure that all of those individuals who are a part of that, especially the teachers, have access to the manipulative kits and different things like that to make their life as easy as possible, because piloting work is physically and emotionally investing, but it's also incredibly rewarding because you learn a lot about the teaching and learning of mathematics or whatever content area that you're piloting. So the really cool thing about this is that both programs also have additional like diagnostic assessments and mini lessons and interventions that we can use. And our schedule at the elementary level, we have a win time for math and a win time for reading. That's an additional 25 minutes for teachers to respond to student needs. And so both of these products and the funding our decisions will obviously be made on what's happening within core, but there are also additional features with those programs to create one, tier 2, tier 3 level of support that our teachers will be able to kind of play around with throughout the year that they're very excited about. We'll also obviously have professional development. The Amplify we have a prior history with. Eureka Squared, there's a lot of neighboring districts that use it. Kearney Northwest uses it, but as you saw from our EL comparison data, Crete uses it, and they have a higher EL percentage than us and have a higher NSCAS percent proficiency than us. So all of those districts would tell you the number one thing you have to invest in is professional learning. And the great thing about those 2 companies is they've actually comped most of the professional learning because they want to ensure that this pilot is successful for us. our prior relationship with Amplify, and if we adopt Eureka Squared, we would be the largest district in the state doing it. So they're willing to kind of throw in some extra professional learning that we are not having to pay for, which is fantastic. We can use our size to our advantage sometimes. So the proposal is to approve up to $95,000 in LFREL funds to support this year-long pilot in all 4 buildings. $43,000 of that will go to Star and Stolly Park for all the materials that they will need. Around $37,000 plus a little bit extra for Skills Academy, which we decided this week is also going to be a part of the project, will go to Lincoln and Newell Elementary. And then I did set aside, as in the proposals, like just additional funding to respond to the needs of teachers. Do they need some additional professional learning? Are they wanting to learn more about a certain thing within the resource? That allows me to have some funds available to bring people in to support teachers with the things that they've identified. It'll also enroll, we're trying to only purchase exactly what's needed, so any sort of big enrollment changes will also do that. So this just gives me some cushion to be able to make sure that we always have the materials that we need. So the next step of this, obviously, is next year is going to be a really busy year around here, and we're going to have all those teachers and buildings engaged in that process. The committee that Andrea spoke about, in addition to some representatives from each of the pilot buildings, will be overseeing this process. So they will continue to meet. They'll look at data. We are going to be getting feedback constantly from teachers in the classrooms using these materials. And so it's going to be a very involved process. And then you'll see me back in a year with the recommendations from that committee in terms of which of those 2 we want to adopt moving forward. This is info in action tonight, just as an FYI, because teachers want the materials as soon as possible, and Eureka Squared in particular has told me that if we order soon, we can get the materials here for teachers before summer break. So if teachers wanted to take their teacher manuals with them over summer, not that they have to, but again, another surprise, they're wanting things now. So I want to be able to honor that, and so we're asking for info and action tonight so we can get those things ordered, and I'm busy scrambling to do that tomorrow. So any questions about the process or anything related to math? Because I got 2 ladies here that really love to talk about math. They didn't wear their sparkly boots, though. I'm a little...
Oh, but we match.
We match our shoes, though. Look at that.
Mr. Hawley.
Can you describe the process, Dr. Berman, of evaluating this a little bit further? So like you said, I mean, we're going to have 6 grades, 4 schools, 2 programs. There's a lot of pieces in this puzzle, and we're going to have a lot of feedback from instructors. Does it come down to looking at progression of students from last year where they were to this year where they are in the new program? Is it based on grade? I mean, there's got to be a lot of pieces. What data are you evaluating to see which program is better?
That is an excellent question. And the first thing you want to do is not evaluate one data set. Like, it has to be multi-compassing, triangulated, including both quantitative, in my opinion, and qualitative data. So our amazing secretary on our LFREL team actually started working on this today. We'll look at their standards benchmark data from this year to next year for each building. So we'll look at proficiency of standards on our district benchmarks. We'll look at MAP growth, some of the data that Caitlin shared to see, we're seeing this trend of a dip from fall to winter. Are we still seeing that? Or did the resources within those classrooms, did that help kind of minimize that more? The biggest thing that I've done in the past, like when I've talked to you about high school resource adoptions, is I'm going to ask teachers to fill out a very simple form, like 3 questions every 2 weeks, to really get their experiences of what's working right now and what's not working right now, and what are you seeing from your kids. And so it's really honestly kind of nerdy and cool when you get done with it, because you have this story of what played out in the moment it's playing out, instead of asking people at the end of the experience, right? Like, so what happened and how did it go? It's like you have this like almost like an in the moment record of what the teacher was experiencing. There'll obviously be a lot of observations and being in classrooms, because I think the perspective we miss a lot is the student, because if we're doing this for kids, then we need to make sure that our kids are interacting with the materials in the way that we want them to. And so there's a lot of different components, and that's why it takes a committee too to kind of really oversee that process and make sure we're considering it's not just outcome data, it's teacher experience, more qualitative data, it's different quantitative data components, because you want to make sure that is the resources we're using, is that really doing what we want it to do? And it's why you really field test, and that part of the policy is there. Because looking at a stack of books in a room, it doesn't matter how many days you do it for, nothing tells you more than the lived experience of a teacher using it with students in a classroom.
Thank you.
Owen.
Hey, so obviously you guys haven't done your pilot yet, and hopefully that'll get approved tonight. But I was just wondering, you guys started off your meeting talking about needing more simplicity, and kind of something that I've really noticed in my family is that math, more than probably any other subject, is really like a family subject in elementary school, where teachers kind of have to send home homework. And for me, that was fine. I was before this past system, but my sister, who's just 6 years younger than me, was under this new system when she was in elementary school. And I remember, it was a challenge for my parents, and even for me, to even help her with her homework, because it was just so different from anything we learned when I'm only 6 years older than her, and it's just so different. And so will parent and family support kind of be taken into that? Because I really feel like when you send kids home with this stuff, and it's just like, wow, my parents can't even figure it out, how am I supposed to do it, right? Hopefully, I'm just hoping that somewhere that gets into that pilot project of how is this able to involve the whole family, and whether that's going back to simpler methods that parents better understand, or sending home extra packets for them where they can hopefully learn the new methods, but something like that. So.
The nice thing about the two resources that we're looking at that's missing in our current resource is family materials. So there are family letters and things that you can send home every month or in every subunit that really shows the strategies that kids are learning. I've talked to this group. I could nerd out for the next 2 hours if you really want to. But the thing that we have to be careful about in mathematics is, myself, most of the parents in the room, we learned via algorithms. And so you give me a bunch of multiplication. This is a true story, and this kind of illuminates this. So I talked to my son one day when he was in kindergarten, and he was looking at a cereal box, and he looked at the number of calories on the cereal box, and he noticed that there were 7 servings in it, and he goes, well, Mom, how many calories are in this box? And I'm thinking, you're a kindergartner, why are you worrying about calories? But in true educator form, I go, well, what do you think? How would you figure out how many calories are in that box? And he does it, and he gives me the answer, and it was right. And he's like, well, how did you do it? And I was thinking the multiplication algorithm in my head. It was really embarrassing. I'm thinking 140 times 7, 0 times 7 carried the things over, and that's what I'm doing, right? And instead, he tells me, well, there's 7 groups. I could think of it as 7 groups of 100. That would be 700. And then I have the 40 left over. And there's 7 groups of 40. That's 280. So then I add the 700 and the 280 together, and I get 980. And then I was really embarrassed because I was thinking the standard algorithm in my head. So what we're trying to get kids to do is, yes, those algorithms will be there, but that's not actually mathematical reasoning. And we want kids to make sense of problems and problem solve and become reasoners, because I don't want to continue to do this algorithm in my head and be really, really embarrassed when my kids tell me these brilliant ideas, and I'm like, I really wish I thought about that. I'm not going to share my ideas anymore. So there are family letters in there, which is really, really fantastic. That's something, and they come in Spanish, which is also great. Amplified Desmos Math is new, so some of those Spanish translations they're continuing to work on, but that is an important component as we help people realize that the standards they are actually the same as what we had as our own learners of mathematics, but we're really trying to push the developing of reasoning skills that can be applied. And so we're not just, we have calculators that can do the algorithm for us, and so we want problem solvers and critical thinkers, and those are the things we're trying to develop.
Mr. Garcia Mendez.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you all have put into this. I think it's the textbooks and all of that sound intimidating, but
It's fun, I promise.
as long as you enjoy it, you know. I had a quick question about some of the data points, and I know during our L4L committee meeting we discussed how do we know when we know this is good, right? Is there a certain timeline, or I was looking at the policy right now, but is there a certain timeline that the district like looks at, like, because we saw some of the data points of like the school year of 2018 to 19, and then now this previous one of in 23 and 24, and just how those gaps were just increasing compared to the state in JIPS. Is there ever a time when it's like, we got to find something like more soon? I'm assuming that looking at that gap is what encouraged everyone to be like, yeah, we should probably not wait. Is there, I guess I'm just asking, is there a unique scenario where you're like, ever like, we should look at this, like once this gets
Sooner than
implemented?
7
Yeah,
years? Is that what you're
sooner
talking
than 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So the important part of this is it has been 7 years. So regardless, if we hadn't made the decision to pilot, I would have been coming you for money to purchase additional Origo materials. To answer your question, we have actually done that before. In 2016, 2017, we adopted Big Ideas at the middle school level and utilized that for a couple years, and it was not doing at all what we needed it to do. And we were able to secure some like special funding, like through Gear Up and some different sources, so it wasn't all coming out of the general fund, to engage in a pilot at the middle school level 3 years after that. And that was really teacher driven, where the teachers were saying, this is not at all doing what we need it to do, and they were having to work really, really hard to plan all these lessons to meet the needs of their kids and their standards. So we have done that before, based on student and teacher experiences. That's what it's all about. Obviously, you want to not do that, but we're pretty positive. We feel really great about these two resources and the excitement that's around it. When people didn't want to delay and 7 buildings wanted to do it, and people want their materials right now, and I'm like, whoa, just finish out the school year, it's okay. I got an email or a text message from Whitney Flower. She's got teachers using the demo login to like get in and like use and pull stuff already, and I'm like, okay, probably shouldn't tell the publisher that, but people are really excited, and it aligns really nicely with our vision. I think at the committee meeting, somebody asked, like, how do we know what makes this different than like when we adopted Origo in 2019, 2020? And the last several years, we've been talking a lot about math instruction and just instruction in general. Andrea mentioned opportunities to respond, discourse, that's all language that our teachers are using, our buildings are using. And so we've been digging into this, getting ready for this moment for the last 3 years or so. And I think that's why people are excited, because teachers are working really hard to do those things because their current resource doesn't do it. And our district has identified it as a priority and a need. These two resources have all those things we've been talking about already embedded within. So it's less work for everybody else.
Okay, is there any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to item 5.5, policy.